Well, it's a brand new deal that could earn her a lot of royalties. Meghan Markle is reportedly considering signing a deal with...
She's, among other things, a disaster tourist who cannot seem to stop herself from taking advantage of places where people have suffered amazing hardship.
Dior says this is not true. They have no idea where this came from. And as I told you and your producer...
Dior just cut Meghan Markle off completely. And here's the thing, this isn't some small boutique we're talking about. This is Dior, the brand that dresses queens, princesses, literal royalty without batting an eye. But with Meghan, they said no more. No contact, no collaboration. Don't even ask. And listen, when a fashion house like that shuts the door on someone, it's not random. It's because they've seen something. Stories started surfacing about missing gowns, borrowed pieces that never came back, photo shoots that ended with more items gone than anyone expected. Then something happened that made it impossible to ignore. A green dress vanished after a magazine shoot and showed up on Meghan's body 3 years later. That's when everyone started asking the same question. What's really been going on? And once you hear everything, you'll understand why even the biggest names in fashion decided they were done. Before we dive in, just know this goes way deeper than one dress. We're talking Toronto, the Palace, and a cycle nobody could ignore. Hit that subscribe button and smash the like so you don't miss what happens next, because it gets wild. Picture this. Meghan's doing a Variety magazine shoot. Everything looks normal. She's posing in this beautiful, soft green designer dress, cameras clicking, lights perfect, the whole professional setup. Hair and makeup teams hovering around, assistants adjusting the fabric. Just another day, like any other celebrity photo shoot. Nothing unusual. But here's where it gets weird. That dress, it was alone, standard procedure in the fashion world.
I'm learning French on Duolingo, she says proudly, adding that she just hit a 90-day streak. I don't know how anyone...
Designer sends a piece, celebrity wears it for the shoot, piece goes back. Simple, clean, everyone knows the deal. You've got paperwork, tracking, a whole system to make sure nothing gets messy. Except when this shoot wrapped up, the dress wasn't there anymore. The team began packing things up, inventorying what came in versus what was going out. That green dress? Nowhere to be found. No paperwork saying she could keep it, no permission, no conversation about purchasing it, no explanation at all, just gone. Vanished like it never existed. Now here's what makes this interesting. The wardrobe team didn't panic right away. These things happen sometimes. Maybe it got packed in the wrong bag. Perhaps an assistant put it aside and forgot about it. Could be some miscommunication. So they waited. They followed up, they asked around, but the dress never came back. This could have stayed buried forever. Might have been forgotten, written off as some weird mix-up nobody wanted to make a big deal about. Fashion people deal with drama all the time. They know when to push and when it's better to let things go. So this became one of those quiet stories mentioned in private conversations, but never making it past closed doors. But then, 3 years later, Meghan shows up wearing that exact same green dress again. Same dress, same designer, and suddenly it wasn't a mystery. Not a mix-up, not something anyone could brush aside or explain away. That moment when she appeared in that dress again, fashion people began connecting dots they'd been ignoring for way too long. Designers recalled things. Stylists thought back to warnings they'd heard whispered at industry events. Wardrobe coordinators remembered conversations that didn't sit right at the time, but seemed too small to make noise about.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, the world's least happy millionaire, are said to be on the rocks. How surprising.
All those little moments that felt off, but never quite added up to anything concrete. They suddenly formed a picture nobody could unsee. Because here's the thing, this wasn't a one-time mistake. Not someone accidentally taking home the wrong item. When that dress reappeared on her body 3 years after it vanished from that shoot, it was like watching all the pieces fall into place. The kind of moment that makes you quit scrolling, quit pretending you didn't notice, and go, okay, wait, we need to talk about everything else that's happened. And when people began talking, when they started comparing notes and realizing they weren't the only ones who'd experienced something similar, that's when the real story began to unfold. Get this. When that green dress showed up on Meghan again, designers didn't react with shock. They weren't gasping. Nobody called emergency meetings. No, their reaction was more like tired recognition. Like, yeah, we've been dealing with this. Like they'd been waiting for someone else to finally notice what they'd been managing behind the scenes for years. Because here's what nobody was saying out loud. Stylists had been avoiding working with her for way longer than anyone realized. Never publicly. Never with any big announcements. They were stepping back. When her team would reach out about borrowing pieces for events or shoots, there'd be silence. Requests went unanswered. Follow-ups hit dead ends. And it wasn't personal, it was protective. Brand managers weren't responding to requests anymore. Assistant designers who'd normally jump at the chance to dress someone high profile suddenly had their calendars full. Fashion houses that would usually fight to get their pieces on a celebrity, they weren't fighting for this one. They weren't even showing up. Why? Simple math.
Queen Camilla apparently made a jab at Meghan by wearing a full Dior outfit after Dior denied a brand deal with Meghan Markle.
If Meghan wore something, you might not see it again. That's what kept circulating through the industry. Not as gossip, not as scandal, as practical information. The kind of thing you'd mention to a colleague over coffee. Hey, so, be careful with that one. And people listened. They adjusted. They protected their inventory and their relationships with designers who trusted them. Now, when smaller brands or independent stylists pull back, nobody really notices. But when the big names start closing ranks, that's different. And Dior, the Dior, choosing they were done, that sent a message nobody could miss. Think about what Dior represents. A fashion house that's dressed actual queens, princesses who wear crowns, icons who've defined entire eras of style. These brands don't say no to high-profile clients. They don't turn down opportunities for exposure. Their whole business model is built on being seen on the right people at the right moments. So when they made the call that someone's not worth the risk, when they essentially say, we're good thanks to someone with Meghan's level of visibility, this wasn't a small decision. And here's what made it even more telling. There was zero drama, zero public statements, zero leaked memos or anonymous sources running to tabloids, a door closing, firmly, finally. The kind of professional distance that doesn't need explanation, because everyone in the industry already understands exactly what it means. Other designers took note. They watched how Dior handled it. Clean, silent, absolute. And they thought, yeah, that's probably the smart play.
You and your
I bet it came from Meghan's team. I bet you anything it came from Meghan's team. Come on.
Absolutely.
Because in fashion, your reputation isn't only about the clothes you make. It's like, it's about who you work with, how you conduct business, whether people can trust you with their pieces. And if lending items has become a gamble, if there's even a chance you won't see your designs again, most houses would rather not take that bet. So the fashion world didn't rebel against Meghan. They didn't organize some coordinated boycott or make public accusations. The industry collectively chose to protect themselves. And in a business built on relationships, access, and trust, that silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. Before the palace, before the titles, long before any designer gowns and state dinners and photographers following her every move, there was Toronto, a regular commercial set, the kind of shoot that happens hundreds of times across the industry, every single week without anyone thinking twice. Meghan walked onto the Reitman set like she'd done 1,000 times before, confident, professional, ready to nail it. She knew how these things went. You show up, you smile, you hit your marks, you collaborate with the wardrobe team, and everybody goes home happy. The crew was excited to have her there. She was charming, easy to work with, knew how to find her light. Everything looked perfect. The shoot went smoothly. They got the shots they needed. Director was happy. Client was happy. When they wrapped for the day, everyone packed up like usual, and the wardrobe coordinator began the end-of-day routine, checking items back in, making sure what came to set was leaving with the right people. But then something felt off. The coordinator started counting, recounting, going through the racks again, and the numbers weren't adding up.
My God, this woman is just the gift that keeps on giving. For journalists, she's just astonishing. Let's go through.
Some dresses were unaccounted for, not damaged, not torn or stained, just not there, gone from the rack without explanation. And then there were the shoes, a pair of aquazzurra heels, the expensive kind, the kind wardrobe departments track carefully. Those had vanished too. The coordinator looked everywhere, under tables, in garment bags, in the dressing room, behind racks, nothing. They asked around, did anyone see where those items went? Did someone pack them by mistake? Nobody had answers. Here's the thing about wardrobe departments. Stuff goes missing sometimes. It happens. Someone packs something in the wrong case. An assistant grabs the wrong bag. It's annoying, but it's usually fixable. So they figured they'd follow up, send some emails, make some calls, track it all down within a few days. Except months went by. Those items never came back, and the whole thing might have stayed as another weird, unexplained loss in the chaos of production life. Annoying, sure, but not worth making a scene over. One of those things you write off and move on from. Until Meghan's royal engagement announcement. That's when people saw the photos. Meghan standing there with Prince Harry, smiling for the cameras, looking absolutely stunning. And on her feet, those exact aquazzurra heels, the very ones that disappeared from that Toronto set months earlier. Identical shoes, no question about it. At that moment, the wardrobe coordinator's stomach probably dropped. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't a mix-up, wasn't an assistant grabbing the wrong bag. This was intentional. When someone finally asked Meghan about it, her explanation was simple. She said she didn't want the items she'd worn ending up on eBay. She was too famous for that. She didn't want people buying things she'd touched and selling them online. Fair concern, right?
Meghan hates being humiliated and rejected in front of the world. This feels like a save face. Let's just leak this, try to...
Celebrities deal with that kind of thing all the time. But fashion folks had the same question everyone else did. If you didn't want them resold, why not ask to buy them? Why not have your team reach out and say, hey, she loves those shoes. Can we purchase them? That's how it normally works. Designers are usually thrilled to sell pieces to celebrities. It's good business. It's easy. It's clean. Instead, the items disappeared. Zero conversation, zero transaction, zero asking permission. And suddenly that explanation about eBay didn't quite add up. That's when the warnings started spreading through the industry. Not loudly, not publicly. One person mentioning it to another over drinks. A stylist quietly telling a colleague at a Fashion Week event. A wardrobe coordinator sharing the story with someone else who worked with high-profile clients. Be careful around her. Things disappear. Simple as that. No drama. Information being passed along so other people could protect themselves. The Reitmans incident became the industry's first warning sign. The moment people realized this wasn't about mistakes or misunderstandings, this was a behavior, a choice. And if it happened once in Toronto, it could happen again anywhere else. So Meghan walks into Kensington Palace thinking, this is just another role, another production. Sure, it's bigger than before, but the fundamentals are identical. You show up, learn the script, play the part. She'd spent years in Hollywood, where if you're the star, certain perks come with the territory. Designer clothes showing up at your door, part of the game, stylists dressing you for free because your visibility is worth more than money.
As the journalist entered the room, Markle had a staff member announce her by her royal title, the
Standard practice. You're not just a person. You're a walking billboard. Your value isn't in what you pay for, it's in what people see you wearing. This was the mindset Meghan carried into those palace doors. Her entire professional life had worked this way. Why would she think this would be any different? But royalty isn't Hollywood, not even close. The royal family operates on completely different rules, guidelines written centuries ago that haven't budged. And one of the biggest ones, no freebies. Not clothing, not jewelry, nothing. If you wear it, you buy it. End of story. This isn't some stuffy tradition. There's a solid reason. The royal family can't be seen as endorsing products or accepting gifts because that creates conflicts of interest. Items get purchased, they get logged, they get tracked. Every royal woman before Meghan had followed these guidelines without pushing back. Catherine did it. Camilla did it. Even Princess Diana played by these standards. But within weeks, palace staff started noticing something. Requests for designer gifts were coming in, full-on requests for brands to send her clothing and accessories. And when staff gently reminded her of the regulations, the reaction wasn't what they expected. She resisted. Hard. These boundaries didn't look like reasonable guidelines to her. They looked like obstacles, outdated barriers. Why couldn't she accept gifts if designers wanted to give them? Why couldn't she operate the way she had for years? Staff tried to explain patiently. It's not about you personally. This is about the institution, about maintaining neutrality. But the message didn't land. The argument kept coming back. Exceptions should apply to her. Her situation was different. Her background and platform should allow for flexibility. Palace aides realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't just a misunderstanding.
Save face, let's just leak this, try to divert attention from the Spotify deal. And, I think we should have been...
This wasn't someone who didn't know the system yet. What they saw was someone who understood the regulations perfectly well and thought they shouldn't apply to her. And then there was the other issue. Borrowed pieces weren't being returned. When designers would loan items for official events, those pieces weren't coming back. Follow-up requests were being ignored. Phone calls went unanswered. Toronto all over again, except inside Kensington Palace. Staff would check in, has the dress been sent back yet? Vague responses, no responses, excuses. Requests kept coming for items that couldn't be approved, but they didn't stop. Over and over, like maybe if she asked enough times, the answer would change. For people who had worked in the palace for decades, this was foreign territory. This level of resistance to basic expectations wasn't in anyone's playbook. Behind closed doors, staffers shared concerns. She doesn't like being told no. Those words came up again and again. Every time someone tried to guide her on protocol, the walls between Meghan and the institution grew taller. The irony. These weren't complicated requirements. They weren't asking her to memorize obscure traditions. They were asking her to not accept free designer clothing. Buy your clothes like everyone else. But that simple request became a massive point of conflict. And this wasn't about money. The royal family would pay for her wardrobe. Prince Charles had taken on that responsibility. She had access to the same resources, the same budget. The only difference was she had to actually purchase items instead of having them gifted. But this difference became a breaking point. Because it wasn't about the clothes, it was about two worldviews colliding. Hollywood's guidelines are flexible and fame changes everything, versus the royal family's...
With somebody named Caitlin Greenwich, who, as far as I can tell, is an absolute idiot.
Expectations exist for everyone, and nobody gets special treatment. When those perspectives crashed into each other, something had to give. Prince Charles has a straightforward responsibility when it comes to his sons' wives. He funds their wardrobes while they're performing duties on behalf of the crown. It's an established setup that's worked fine for years. You're representing the family at official events. Charles covers the cost. Simple. Catherine, for example, spends around £100,000 annually on her wardrobe. Before you think, wow, that's a lot, consider what that covers. An entire year of royal tours across multiple countries. State dinners with world leaders, charity events, garden parties, award ceremonies, official photographs, every single outfit for 12 full months of royal work. She rewears pieces constantly. You'll see the identical dress show up 3, 4, 5 times at different events, mixing and matching, recycling, making a wardrobe stretch. People love that she's not wasteful. So when Meghan joined the family, Charles expected something similar. Maybe a bit more since she was building from scratch. He wasn't worried about the budget, he just expected it would be reasonable. Except that's not what happened. Meghan's first year, her wardrobe costs approached £1 million, nearly £1 million, with fewer engagements than Catherine, 10 times what Catherine spent. For fewer appearances, for someone who should have been learning the ropes, not building a fashion empire. When Charles saw those numbers, he couldn't make sense of them. How does someone spend that much in such a short time? Why so many pieces? Items being purchased that never showed up at events, things not being reworn the way Catherine recycled her wardrobe. And then there were the phone calls, designers reaching out to the palace, not to praise.
Me to say to you, do you think she's continuing to copy the Pamela Anderson playbook with the barefaced cover, magazine cover?
Calling to ask when their items would be returned. Pieces loaned for specific events that hadn't come back. Staff trying to track down items that should have been sent back weeks ago but had vanished. Charles started hearing these stories from multiple sources. Staff fielding calls, aides getting questions, people managing royal accounts flagging unusual patterns. This was becoming a recurring problem nobody knew how to handle. So Charles decided to address it. Not like an attack, just as a gentle discussion about expectations and boundaries. He's funding the wardrobe. He has every right to ask questions when spending reaches levels that don't make sense. He tried to keep it delicate. These are the protocols we follow. This is why we have these systems. This is what's expected in this role. Nothing harsh, just a father-in-law trying to help his son's wife understand how things operate in the family she'd married into. According to people who witnessed what happened after that talk, Meghan didn't take it well. What she heard wasn't guidance. She heard attack. She didn't feel supported. She felt targeted. She saw Charles singling her out, controlling her, trying to limit her in ways Catherine wasn't being limited. The response was defensive. Why was he looking at her expenses so closely? Why wasn't anyone questioning Catherine? Being held to different standards, everything under a microscope? She felt like she was being treated unfairly, monitored, and managed in ways that felt suffocating. People around the palace noticed the shift immediately. The relationship between Charles and Meghan, which had started warm and welcoming, suddenly had tension. Charles had hoped the conversation would clarify things. Instead, it created a wider divide. Charles wasn't wrong to be concerned.
Meghan hates being humiliated and rejected in front of the world. This feels like a safe face. Let's just leak this, try to...
The numbers didn't add up. The spending was excessive. The missing items were a real problem. But trying to address those concerns became impossible because correction was interpreted as attack. Guidance was seen as control. Boundaries were viewed as unfair treatment. Staff who'd been with the family for decades had never seen anything like it. They'd dealt with difficult personalities before. But this, different. Someone who believed that being asked to follow the same rules as everyone else was persecution. Charles tried a few more times to bring up the wardrobe expenses. Different angles, different tones, different people. Each attempt made things worse. Each conversation pushed Meghan further away rather than bringing her closer. What Charles wanted was accountability. What Meghan heard was unfair criticism. Somewhere in that gap between intention and interpretation, the relationship fractured in ways that would be hard to repair. The wardrobe issue had nothing to do with money. It was about expectations, boundaries, and what happens when someone fundamentally disagrees with being held accountable to standards they never wanted to follow. Listen, this is the question that comes up every time. If Meghan has money, why would any of this even happen? What's the point of someone with her wealth walking away with items that didn't belong to her? Let's be clear on the money we're talking about. A $15 million mansion in Montecito. Netflix deals worth tens of millions. Spotify deals, book deals, brand partnerships. A global platform with millions of followers. Someone with access to essentially unlimited resources. So, why would she need to take a dress? Why would someone at that level even think twice about designer shoes? It's like watching someone with a full bank account shoplift. It makes you go, wait, what? People who've watched this unfold say the same thing.
And she showed up dressed in pure white, fashioned by Dior. I'm going to show you the pictures. Hold on. But
this had nothing to do with money. Never about whether she could afford to buy items. It was something way more complicated. It came down to entitlement, believing items should be hers without purchasing them, carrying a mentality from one industry into another where that thinking just didn't work. Think about how Hollywood operates. When you're famous, brands throw things at you. Not from generosity, because your face wearing their product is worth more than the item's cost. If Meghan Markle walks down a red carpet in your dress, that dress gets photographed, talked about, featured everywhere. That exposure can't be bought with traditional advertising. So designers compete to dress celebrities. In that ecosystem, accepting gifts isn't taking something you haven't earned. You're providing a service. Your fame, your platform, your ability to make a designer's work visible to millions, that has value. Real, measurable value. When a brand offers you clothing, you're engaging in a transaction where both sides benefit. They get exposure, you get a wardrobe, everyone wins. This is the space Meghan came from. Stylists pulling racks of designer clothes for events, brands sending gifts hoping she'd wear them publicly, PR teams reaching out, all normal, expected. How business gets done in Hollywood, and when you've spent years in that system, it becomes how you think things operate. You're not stealing when you keep something. You're accepting compensation for visibility. The item isn't the payment. You wearing it is the payment. This perspective makes perfect sense in Hollywood. But royalty doesn't operate that way. At all. The royal family can't accept gifts from brands because that creates endorsements. The appearance of favoritism. The whole system is designed to keep everything above board. Items get purchased, they get logged, they get tracked. That's how you maintain institutional integrity, how you avoid scandals.
She's an influencer in like family wrecking is what she is.
How much would this deal be?
But if you're coming from Hollywood where wearing is the payment, these royal rules feel nonsensical. Why pay for something when you're providing value by wearing it? Through a Hollywood lens, the palace should be negotiating for payment from brands, not paying them. The whole system is backwards. And in fashion, separate from both Hollywood and royalty, there's a different ecosystem. Fashion operates on relationships, trust. When a designer loans a piece, they're trusting you to return it. Break that trust once, word spreads fast. Break it repeatedly, doors close. It's a small industry. Everyone knows everyone. Reputation matters more than anything. When someone with a Hollywood way of thinking collides with royal protocol while also working in fashion, you get this perfect storm. Hollywood says, you're entitled to keep things because your fame is valuable. Royalty says, you must purchase items to maintain neutrality. Fashion says, you must return what you borrow because trust matters. If you believe strongly in that first viewpoint, the other two feel unfair. What people mean when they say the issue wasn't financial. Meghan could have bought every item 10 times over. The money was there. Prince Charles was literally paying for her wardrobe, but needing to buy what she felt entitled to receive for free. That was the sticking point. It's like if someone told you that you had to pay full price for something you'd spent years getting for free. You'd feel confused, frustrated. The principal would feel wrong. Why am I paying for this when I used to get it as part of the deal? That's the gap nobody could bridge. Palace protocol felt like a tax instead of guidance because Meghan's viewpoint, shaped by years in Hollywood, told her she wasn't breaking rules. She was being denied something that should have been hers. The fashion world's perspective?
Turn it to the right. All the way right. Yeah, both of you right here, please.
Items were disappearing and trust was breaking. The royal family's angle, protocol was being ignored and boundaries were being crossed. Meghan's side? Everyone was making a big deal out of nothing. 3 different industries, 3 different sets of expectations, 3 completely incompatible ways of understanding how things should work. And no amount of money could fix that fundamental disconnect. Once Dior made their decision, that quiet, final, we're done decision, the rest of the fashion industry went on to pay very close attention. Not because Dior made some big public announcement. They didn't. Not because there was drama or leaked memos or insider tell-alls. There weren't any. But when a house like Dior steps back from someone, everyone in fashion notices. It's like when the most popular restaurant in town removes someone's reservation privileges behind closed doors. No signs, no explanations. You're not welcome here anymore. And other designers began thinking. They began remembering their own experiences, comparing notes in ways they hadn't before. When you're dealing with something on your own, you might think it's just you. A weird situation that happened to your brand specifically. Maybe you made a mistake in how you handled things. Maybe you misunderstood what was agreed upon. Maybe it was all an unfortunate miscommunication. But when you realize other houses dealt with the exact thing, when you find out that Toronto wardrobe coordinator wasn't the only one, when you hear that Dior decided it wasn't worth the risk, suddenly you're not overreacting. You're being smart. Designers went on to protect themselves in ways that were subtle but effective. They stopped offering pieces for loans. They stopped responding to requests from certain teams. They stopped making their collections available for certain stylists to pull from.
Now, this interview was the second sit-down in as many weeks. Before this one, the reporter met with Markle at Polo Bar in Beverly Hills.
And they did all of this privately, professionally, without ever publicly saying why. That's how fashion works at this level. You don't burn bridges publicly. You don't create scandals. You close doors firmly, permanently. What's wild is that when you look at the timeline from that Toronto Reitman's commercial all the way through the Palace years, the identical behavior kept showing up. Different locations, different circumstances, different people involved. But the core issue, the same every single time. Items would go missing from sets. Pieces wouldn't come back after events. Explanations would be vague or non-existent when people asked where things went. Follow-up requests would hit walls, phone calls wouldn't get returned, and everyone who experienced it would be left with this uncomfortable feeling of, did that really just happen? In Toronto, it was Aquazzura heels and dresses from a commercial shoot. At the Variety photo shoot, it was that green designer dress. At Kensington Palace, it was borrowed pieces that should have been returned to designers, but somehow never made it back. Different settings, consistent behavior, over and over and over. And for the longest time, these were all separate incidents in people's minds. The Toronto team knew their story. The Variety magazine people knew theirs. The Palace staff knew what they were dealing with. Designers who'd loaned items knew when their pieces went missing. But no one was connecting all the dots since people weren't talking to each other about it. Until that green dress showed up again. This was the moment everything changed. When all those separate stories suddenly turned into one story. When Meghan wore that variety dress 3 years after it disappeared from the shoot, it wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't maybe it got lost, or maybe there was a misunderstanding, or maybe someone made an error in the paperwork.
Meghan in the future. But let's face it, next steps truly it seemed to be only influencer for Meghan.
It was clear. It was visible. It was undeniable. Fashion people began reaching out to each other. Wait, did you experience something similar? Have you had pieces go missing? Did you ever loan items that never came back? And the answers kept piling up. Yes, yes, yes. Multiple designers, multiple stylists, multiple wardrobe coordinators, multiple situations where the identical thing happened with the same person at the center. What had been careful conversations in private, whispers at Fashion Week, warnings passed between colleagues, turned into something the entire industry was aware of. Not in a public, scandalous way. Fashion's too smart for that. They don't air dirty laundry in tabloids. They share information. They protect each other. They make sure everyone knows what they're dealing with before they agree to work with someone. And after that information spread, after everyone in fashion knew the trend, the opportunities began drying up. Not dramatically, not with announcements or explanations. Drying up, calls not getting returned, requests sitting unanswered, PR teams getting the silent treatment, lookbooks suddenly being unavailable, collections being already committed to other clients. Here's what the fashion industry learned. Lending to Meghan was a gamble. And in an industry where your inventory is your livelihood, where your designs are your reputation, where your pieces represent months or years of work, you don't gamble. You protect what's yours. You work with people you trust. And if trust has been broken enough times, you find other clients. From Toronto to Kensington, the story stayed consistent. The locations changed, the specific items changed, the people around her changed, but the behavior, exactly the same. Items vanished. Explanations didn't add up. Follow-throughs didn't happen, and eventually people stopped being surprised and began being prepared. The fashion world doesn't do confrontation, they do distance. And after Dior showed everyone how to create that distance professionally, cleanly, and permanently, the rest of the industry followed. Not because they were being mean or petty or unfair. Since they were being smart, they'd learned, they'd seen the cycle too many times to ignore it. And that green dress?
It's always out with the old, in with the new with Meghan, and it looks like poor Harry could be next for the chopping block.
That wasn't only a dress, it became the moment everyone finally saw what had been happening all along. The thing that connected every single story and made the whole situation impossible to ignore. This wasn't a series of accidents or misunderstandings or coincidences. This was a choice, a trend of behavior that followed one person across years, across continents, across completely different situations. And when the fashion world saw it clearly, they made their own choice. Protect themselves, protect their work, protect their businesses. No drama, no public statements, no big confrontations. Doors closing, one after another after another. Until the message was crystal clear. We're done here. So here we are. One green dress turned into the thing nobody could pretend didn't happen. Not the first incident, not the biggest incident, but the most visible one. The one where all those quiet whispers became impossible to ignore. When you wear something that disappeared from a photo shoot 3 years earlier, you're not just making a fashion choice. You're showing everyone exactly what happened. Once people saw it with their own eyes, all the other pieces fell into place. Toronto clicked, the palace spending added up. The designer phone calls finally made sense. All those separate stories that seemed unconnected suddenly formed a complete picture. From a commercial set in Canada to the halls of Kensington Palace, the identical behavior followed her through different settings, different people, but with a consistent result every single time. Here's what strikes me most.
She's got to start. And would that be convenient for her because it's little work with a huge payout? So I think
this has nothing to do with someone who couldn't afford things. We're talking about someone with millions of dollars, royal connections, global fame, and access to essentially any designer she wanted. Money and access were never the problem. It was a fundamental belief. Certain rules shouldn't apply. Fame creates exceptions. Wearing something is payment enough for keeping it. Hollywood taught her this mindset, and honestly, in Hollywood, it works. But royalty operates on completely separate principles. Fashion operates on trust. Try to force one world's rules onto another world, refusing to accept them, something breaks. When Dior said no, Dior, a brand literally dressing queens without hesitation, that said it all. Never about making some big announcement. Never about wanting attention or drama. They decided the risk wasn't worth it. In an industry where reputation means everything, where relationships matter more than almost anything else, that decision spoke volumes. Other designers followed, not out of pettiness or unfairness, protection mode for their work, their inventory, their businesses. They'd learned the hard way. Lending items had become unpredictable. Trust, once broken repeatedly, doesn't rebuild itself just because someone's famous. The fashion world doesn't operate on cancellations or public call-outs. They operate on access. When access gets quietly removed, doors close without explanation, calls don't get returned, opportunities dry up. That's more final than any public statement could ever be. What remains now is the question the industry keeps asking. How did it take this long? How did the same behavior repeat itself through years and continents and totally different situations before people finally said enough? Maybe everyone thought they were the only one experiencing it. Maybe no one wanted to be the first to make noise.
She didn't allow one photographer to shoot her at a bad angle. Even when she didn't know where the camera was, she knew where the camera was. Hold on, because I'm going to show you. Bang!
Maybe calling out behavior feels risky when someone's that famous, that connected, that visible. But that green dress changed the calculation. It turned whispers into confirmation. It connected dots sitting separate for too long. It forced the pattern into undeniable territory. The fashion industry has chosen, not with anger, not with drama, with distance, professional, permanent distance, the kind not needing explanation since those involved already understand exactly what it means. This whole story has nothing to do with clothes. It's about expectations. What happens when someone carries one world's rules into another world, refusing to accept them? The difference between being entitled to something and believing you're entitled to it. How many times a pattern can repeat before people stop making excuses and start protecting themselves? The dress showed everyone what had been happening. Sometimes that's all it takes. One visible, undeniable moment, getting people to stop and realize something important. What they experienced was real. Their reactions were justified. Their caution was fair, and they were simply paying attention.